It's the wrong video. Hi everyone, and welcome again to the Economy of Francesco School. It's very nice to see you all, and please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker today, Yves Chiapello, a sociologist and economist, the Directrice d'études of the School for Advanced Study in the Social Sciences in Paris, and also a special thanks and welcome to our three discussants, Ingrid, Plinio, and Alex, that you will know later on. We are glad and grateful to have Yves Chiapello here today with us, and that she has accepted our invitation. But before introducing her and giving you the practical information about the webinar, I will ask Professor Luigino Bruni, the scientific coordinator of Economy of Francesco, to say some words to greet Professor Chiapello.
Yes. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Professor Chiapello, for your presence here, for us, for our school. Your presence is very important because most of us are aware of your works on capitalism, in particular on the spirit of capitalism, and not only your book with the Professor Boltanski, but also your own research on that. Already in your book on the new spirit of capitalism, this dimension of finance was already important and was already one of the key words of for understanding the spirit of our capitalism. And then we are very curious, interested in knowing how you develop in the last years the role of the finance in our capitalism and in our society. The Economy of Francesco School, this is one of the final lectures of our program. Before you in 9 of July, there were Professor Robert Sugden from UEA, England, speaking about the nature of the market. And I think today is a very nice, very interesting providential continuity between the nature of the market and your reflection, your understanding of the nature of our capitalism, in particular in relation to finance. Then thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here. And I'm listening to you together with the other people. Thank you.
Okay. So before giving the floor to Professor Chiapello, just some quick notes. Now, as Professor Bruni said, we arrived to the last lectures, and so you know already this, but we will share the link for the registration on the chat of Zoom and YouTube several times. So really there is no need to ask for it, but there is need instead of your comments, opinions, reactions to what you hear, to what Professor Chiapello will say. And again, the chat is the perfect place to do that. And finally, thanks to the generosity of Alejandro and Alvaro, we will have translations on Zoom in Portuguese and Spanish, so you can access this translation, and I thank personally both of them. So I say just a few words because Professor Bruni as just, I mean, the important thing. But the title of today's talk is The Rise of Impact on Financing Decision. And you have to know that it's been more than 2 years, actually longer, that Il Chiapello focus on the phenomenon of the financialization of our economy and the tools that accompany this financialization. If I may say so, I mean, I see Chiapello as a critical author, not because she has a negative judgment on what she's doing research on, because you know that the critique comes from the Greek verb crino, meaning to distinguish, to separate. And in Italian, we have the crinale, which is the profile of the peaks of mountain chain that separates the two sides of the mountain, which ideally trace a line between the two sides of the mountain. And in this sense, I think that Yves Chiapello is observing the business sector with the aim to understand through distinctions how it is infiltrated by tools and practice related to finance, whereas tools mean, and I quote from her profile, instruments which rely both conceptually and technically on the technical and scientific corpus of modern finance. And of course, this work of Professor Chiapello is connected to these previous works with Luc Bozzaschy, but also other important manual. But I want still more time from the lecture. And so I thanks again, Professor Yves Chiapello, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction. I hope, okay, I decided on a topic for the talk. I hope it will be okay for for everyone. It's, you know, with your kind of audience, you never know exactly what should be done and so on. So I will share my screen. Let's try. Yeah. Okay. So I decided to take the question of impact, and especially impact investing, as the topic of my talk, because I think that impact has become a very fashionable topic nowadays, and it could be probably, it is probably quite appealing for those like you who are maybe trying to reinvent economic behavior. At least I know it is appealing to some part of the social reform. So, and I must say, as an introduction, you said I'm a critical thinker, and I must say that I do not share in the general enthusiasm about this idea of using impact to change the finance decision making. And my main thesis, in a nutshell, is that impact is more like a trap. Attracting a reformist mind, because it is a pure product of the financialized capitalism, and somehow I think it's not enough to change the financialized capitalism, just to add this impact story. So impact is the way a financialized capitalism tries to answer, mainly superficially, to the problems it has generated. But this does not change the general organization of the financial system. So I will not make a complete case against, but I will enter in the story by trying to show you at the level of the instruments, because it's or the calculation, why I think it's not a very productive reform idea. Okay, so this is the contents of my talk. So we'll first look at the craze for these impact ideas. So maybe for those who don't know, then I will explain how this idea is implemented in different kind of financing or funding decision. And then I will go to my final thesis that impact finance originates in the dominant financial framework, and for this reason cannot escape the dominant financial framework. So first part, the rise of impact. So here you find two books at least, and initiatives that are using impact as a keyword. as this group of logos selected among hundreds indicates, the notion has become the rally point of a whole nebula of financiers, consultants, standard setters, evaluators, incubators, accelerators, etc. Now let's zoom on this guy, who is a very important guy in this field. His name is Sir Ronald Cohen. After having brilliantly succeeded in the private equity business that he inaugurated in Europe, in UK, Ronald Cohen started a career as a politician, a reformer, and a philanthropist. In the early 2000s, he promoted what he called at that time social investments. He created various associations, initiatives, and consulting firms. For example, he created Social Finance UK in 2007, and it is this organization who built up the first experiment with social impact bonds. I don't know if you have heard of these devices, but then in 2013, it chaired a very important international initiative, the J8 Social Impact Investment Task Force, who has disseminated the ideas of impact investing. You can see on the screen, and I hope you appreciate it, the title of the main report of the task force, The Invisible Heart of Market. I think it's a very, it gives you a lot of ideas of how these people think. In a speech in 2014, he wrote, over the past couple of centuries, philanthropists have tried their very best to improve the lives of those left behind. But in the mid-30s, governments had begun to realize that philanthropy alone could not cope. Today, welfare states designed for the 20th century are throwing up their arms in face of the struggle against the new century's social challenges. And they realize that they are not best placed to innovate in bringing solutions to social issues. In this speech, impact is pushed as a key notion to help private finance and private financiers to take the place of the welfare states and of the philanthropist. You have to understand it's the next step is to ask private finance to take care for all that. So it is obviously a tremendous ambition, because in these reformers explain that private finance could do better, for example, than welfare states. So these ideas meet an extraordinary echoes in international organizations and at world forums. Countless reports have been produced by investment and development banks, investment funds, auditing firms, influential consultancies, schools of governments, business schools, as well as major American foundations. I present here a sample of 3 reports. The one in the middle is published by JP Morgan Investment Bank. It was commissioned by the Rockefeller Foundation. The second one is made by an audit firm, KPMG, on social impact bonds in the UK. And the third has been published by a subsidiary of the World Bank, the IFC, International Finance Corporation. But I have, like, in my directory on my computer, I have like hundreds, not hundreds, but yeah, a lot of these kind of reports. Okay, so just these charts from Google Trends with the impact investing as topic also shows the growth of the presence of these ideas on the web. As you see, they germinate from 2009 onwards. So it's exactly something that happened after the 2008 financial crisis. And this chart comes from a publication I've sent to you with Lisa Knoll, and we counted academic publication also on the topic, and you see it's exactly the same kind of curve, starting 2009 and then accelerating over the period. Okay, so this is for the topic. So this idea of impact, which is involved in the change of financing decisions. So you have to understand that this idea that concern almost every kind of activities. It concerns the non-profit sector, it concerns public services and administration, and it concerns business enterprise and the for-profit sector. So every activity in every kind of sector is concerned by this craze for impact. And the main point is to introduce the criteria of impact to make financial decision. And as every sector are concerned, every kind of decision maker are concerned. It can be government, philanthropists, or private financiers. So let's go a bit deeper on the story. So if on this, so you have okay. So the role of impact in financing decision will depend on the configuration and the kind of activities that are financed. So I differentiate on this table for-profit investors. The for-profit investors are looking for financial return. And grant and subsidy makers who are not expecting return. So as you can see, philanthropies can be in both columns, because especially when they are foundations, usually they have capital and they used to invest their capital for return on one hand, and on the other hand, they make grants. So philanthropies, and especially the biggest foundations, are very, very important in the promotion of impact investing, because they are interested on both sides. And so the activities that can be financed can be business companies, including banks or credit institutions, and also not-for-profit activities like produced by NGOs or even public service. So let's say that usually the normal case is this one, which means that for-profit investors invest in business company, whereas not-for-profit activities that cannot make money are financed usually by public money and private gift. So this is, let's say, this is the old world, and but the craze, the craze for impact is one of the many signs that this order is not anymore clear, and that the frontiers are blurring between all that. Now we have for-profit investors who want to do good. At the same time, they want, as they said, they want to do well by doing good. So doing well is to make money by doing good. So okay. So the so in the first case, they want to invest in business companies that are profitable but also impactful. And so they look for this very special business company, and and some of them want to invest in this company, and they are also ready to help. They say, okay, we have money, we could help probably in NGOs and public services, but they are for-profit investors. So the main question they have is, oh, they make money with that? No? How could this be possible? So and so this is one of the question. And then and so one way to make it possible is to ask the people from the second column, which means the grant or subsidy makers, to build the return for these profit investors. So to ask grant and subsidy maker to give money to for-profit investor in order to help them to finance not-for-profit activities. So it's exactly what is going on with the third case, where you have like I'm sorry, because I can't see my screen, so it's a bit complicated for me to to see. Okay, yes, and where you see the guy with the glasses, it tries to incentivize the financiers to do good and to use his art, but because it's a for-profit investor, he needs to get some money to do that, and so it's where we can use some grant and subsidies to do that. And finally, concerning the last case, we can see that impact is, this idea of using impact is also used to strengthen also the performance management of the activities that are funded. And so in the four case, the impact, this idea of impact, of measuring impact, I will go a little bit further on that, plays a role, but it's a different one in each time. And what I try to explain in the next slide. Okay, so the first case is the classical proposal of impact investing, where you have impact investors that are looking for a double return, a financial return and a non-financial return. The non-financial return is called the impact. The second case with this one is the case of social impacts bond. There is a special structuring of the financing of activities that are impactful activities, and the impact is converted into a sum of money. It's converted into a return. And usually the return is paid, as I explained, by philanthropies or governments. So this is the social impact bond type. Then we have the third type is to use impact to justify co-financing or mitigating the risk of private investor using grants or subsidies to, as I said, incentivize private investors. And so usually how do they do that? First, they can build like guarantee fund. Like that, for-profit investor will not lose too much money, or they sometimes co-invest and then they accept to be the first to lose the money, for example. It's another way to mitigate the risk. And all these kind of techniques now is called, is put under the umbrella of blended finance. And they also use this idea of impact to explain why government or philanthropies should behave like that. And the final case is these people use impact for allocating money or for monitoring. And they, for example, and so it's the movement of venture philanthropy. So it's a very special way of thinking about philanthropy. And these people, they are looking for making grants according to what they call the social return on investment. So they really selected the people they help by looking at their impact, and they want to have a good impact for the money they spent and so on. So now they are organized in association. You have a movement, and so it's venture philanthropy. And you can have this kind of activities in some countries under the banner of new public management inside the administration, where they say, okay, we are going, for example, to help to give additional money to the schools that have a good impact, for example. And so they use impact measure also to change the funding. So impact investing, social impact bonds, blended finance, and venture philanthropy are the four facets of the same process, trying to change the financing decision by relying on the impact ideas. The impact notion is instrumental in this process that try to displace the way decision-making are made and the way funding are attributed to projects. So I hope now you have the complete picture. I hope it was clear about how impact changed the financing decision. So now in this last question, I will look at the origin or the way the framing, the kind of framing that were made impact possible. So my argument is that impact finance originates in the dominant financial framework, and for this reason, it cannot escape it. The success of the notion that I show in the first part can indeed be attributed to this origin in the dominant framework because of the situation of capitalism, where this dominant framework is also handled by dominant companies, dominant industry, dominant people. But because of this same reason, impact does not really question the dominant sector, framework, and does not question the power of finance. But impact offers two things instead of this deep reform that I think would be probably necessary. It offers first a legitimation of finance, because it shows that finance can serve the common good by adding just a little criteria, which is impact to its whole infrastructure. And the second thing that it does, it extends the sphere of competence of finance. Indeed, private finance is said to be able to handle public money and not for-profit money. So it was what the previous table suggests, where we see philanthropies and public administration that are asked to mimic finance using impact. And also you have to remember the quote from Sir Ronald Cohen I use that says that private finance is a better place, better way to solve the social questions. Okay, so let's go into this final argument. So my objective here is to explain how the notion of impact is taking place in the toolbox of financiers. And I say it's originated from the dominant framework, and it is in the dominant framework. So I will go into the toolbox of these financiers or investors. These investors are supposed to manage sum of money on behalf of other people, and they use usually most of the tools they use come from the financial techniques of portfolio management. In this technique, each investment is summarized by two numbers, so return and risk, that I draw on the screen. The return is supposed to be the expected additional income from the investment, where the risk is the variability of income. Initially, in the 50s, this model was developed to account for the portfolio of stocks, and both figures were estimated from the statistical history of the stocks. But this is the origin, but then this idea of return and risk have proliferated, and these two concepts are now transported to address any kind of situation of investment. And now all financial thinking use these 2 points of reference, wants to bring everything to these 2 points of reference, which makes it very it's saving times, no, because you only have two concepts to manipulate. The finance world have developed over years various quantitative tools and a whole infrastructure to make decisions that use these indicators. And so when these people talking about impact wanted to try to invent a new reform of the financial system, their idea was just to add something else. So, but sorry, I have not finished my explanation about that. Maybe it's very common for you. I'm sorry for that. So I go on with traditional portfolio management. So you have, when you have to make a decision of investment, you classify, the people classify the assets according to risk and return. For example, cash does not yield anything, but is said to be risk-free, whereas at the opposite, startups like venture capital are very risky, but the expected return is high. And in theory, a good financier, a good portfolio managers will make investment whose characteristics are positioned on the curve or above in the green part, and will avoid assets that are below. And thus, somehow, the investment decision finally come down to the consideration of these two indicators, risk and return. And you have to understand, but I think you're already convinced by that this relationship, this curve, is not a descriptive relationship. It's a normative relationship. The curve says what will be financed, which is on the curve or above, and what will not be financed. And so you can have important project or important venture that are in the red zone, but it will not be financed by private finance. That's all. That's somehow why we need public money or philanthropic money and so on. Exactly the kind of question that is the kind of solution that is put at risk with this impact story. So the impact proposal is just to add, as I said, a third criteria in this realm of risk and return. And as you see, this comes from one of the report from the main the investment bank JP Morgan, and they explain that instead of reducing all values to a two-dimensional space like risk and return, they propose a reduction to a three-dimensional space, adding the return thing. So yeah, okay. So this is the idea. This is why my argument, it is because of this simplistic thinking that it's so enticing for the finance world. Okay, so, but the normative link between risk and return is clear. It is shown on the graph, but obviously it is less clear to know what should be the normative link between return and impact. The two-dimensional space of the risk and return offers clear indication on how to make decision, but obviously if you add a third dimension, which it becomes quite complicated, and so all these people pushing for impact investing, social impact bond, etc., to all this group, they are now struggling to find general rules to make decision like and finding what should be the relationship between impact and return and impact and risk. Okay, so a first idea is this one. Is to say that the higher the impact, the lower the return requirement should be. This can be a moral position, like investor can give up return if they are doing what they are doing as high social value. They want to do good, they don't want to make money, so it should be like that. So this position is quite convenient, as a lot of social services that are usually very not profitable are impactful. So because they are not profitable, it's important to give up return to finance them. So it should be, and also it can be also financial belief, saying that high impact mean less risk. So in that case, impact and risk would be more or less the same curve, and we are back to a two-dimension curve. And by the way, if you think about blended finance is exactly trying to add some public money in order to make it possible that high impact project would be less risky. And if it is less risky, the private finance will ask less return. So it would become fundable, financeable. Okay. But this relationship is not so clear, because we could also make a complete opposite argument and say, and so it would be on different ground, but say that return should be prohibited with not impactful investments, or even with bad impact investments, which are quite numerous. And it's, for example, the case nowadays with climate change, when we listen to people saying that investing in polluting activities should not be a profitable business. And it's the only way to stop it, it's to make it not profitable. No, and so and these people somehow they advocate for a different curve. And it's also something that we can find in some discourse from long-term investors. Long-term investor who believe who want to do good, they also often say, okay, impact is a good predictor of long-term return. In the long run, high impact means high return. And so somehow they say, okay, in the short run, it's the the purple curve that is on stage. But in the long term, that's the brown curve. And the orange curve is a better guide. Okay, so just it's my way to organize the discussion, but you see that it's quite a tricky, even with this very simple proposal of adding impact, it opens a lot of discussion, and it's not very easy to find out how to behave. And so the last point I want to tell you is that even if this idea of integrating impact into financial decision is tricky, it is so powerful, it's so attracting for people who have been trained into return and risk, this idea of just adding this one criteria. But there is a lot of initiatives that try to make it happen, they try to build new quantification, to change a little bit the infrastructure, and they try to produce this simplification that would make the world three-dimensional only. There are risk and return, and all the rest should be like something like impact, no? And also they try to produce the tools that will make it as easier to handle as the two-dimensional world. Okay, and so I will finish my talk by mentioning some of these initiatives. So the first thing that is often not very questioned by these people is that I'm sorry, if you believe that problems can be solved, the problem of investing can be solved by adding only a third criterion, you need to find this unique criterion, the impact, and you need to find a criterion that will enable you, for example, to compare, let's say, a project protecting the biodiversity of forest and another project that is like funding a company that help people to find to reintegrate people that are far into the job market, that are far from unemployment. So you are investors, you don't know how to choose, you need to have a universal matrix. So it's one very important topic, and there are huge efforts to develop this set of indicators, like I mentioned, the most well-known, the IRIS database that try to provide a database of standard metrics, at least by sector of activities. And so that would enable comparison into the same sector. But what is even more important is that you have on the top of this set of indicators, you have the scoring system using the standard set of indicators. And with the scoring system, you can compare across sector, and you can try to build indicators that would help impact to be real in the, okay. So you have this kind of initiative, and we should also mention another kind of initiative and these people are not trying really to create a third criterion. They are trying to include impact either in the risk calculation or in return calculation. Concerning the risk calculation, it is exactly what are trying to do this network of central bankers, the Network for Greening the Financial Sector, and NJFS, and they are trying to change the risk measure by adding some climate impact in the risk measures. And the second initiative, these people are trying to do something else, which they try to change the return calculation by adding some impact measures. Actually, they try to change the impact. So in both these, in these two cases, what that I call commensuration with risk and commensuration with return, you see that the impact people, they tried somehow to translate the situation with 3 criteria, which is already a tricky thing, to have only 3, like risk, return, and impact, to only a 2 criteria place. So, okay. So I just explained all that just because I think that for me, the question from the beginning was asked from inside the finance, and this makes a lot of problem that I've tried to explain to you, even if when you stay inside. Okay, now I just have to finish. Sorry, this has been a bit long. So I tried to moderate the enthusiasm about the impact ideas to make a financial decision by showing how much this ideas is dependent on the dominant financial framework. It is this dependence that explains that it is so well financed and so much pushed by the main actors from the sectors as a solution. But as I try to show, the strength is also its weakness, because it actually takes for granted the main financial tools, and they support their legitimacy. For example, they support that money can be invested only for a return. They support the idea that private money should be incentivized to do good, and many of these kind of ideas. Okay. I just have to stop there, and sorry, because I think I was a bit too long.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Professor Chiapello, for your talk, which I would say was stimulating in the good sense. I mean, and so now, I mean, here at the Economy of Francesco, we have also the passion for the dialogue. So I call the first discussant, just to remain in the critical side of and she's Ingrid Omerzo. She's from Croatia. She's working at the National Bureau of Statistics, and she's also part of the Village Policies and Happiness, because in the Economy of Francesco we grouped people working on a similar topic in the village, and Ingrid, she's working in the Policies and Happiness. So Ingrid, please.
Thank you, Paolo, and thank you, Professor Chiapello, for this wonderful presentation. As Paolo mentioned, my name is Ingrid, and one of my field of interests are financial cooperatives as well as collaborative finance in general. So I would like to know more about their role in social finance and impact investing, namely mutual and cooperative financial institutions in their original form are the examples of impact investing and social finance. They were established in most cases with the aim to include underserved people in financial system and to include people in decision making while acting socially responsible. And this is exactly one of the biggest advantages of them. as well as crowdfunding and other forms of collaborative financial institutions with regards to social finance and impact investing. They give the opportunity to these small players, citizens, to participate in making a positive impact on environment and society while investing, not just wealthy individuals. The other field I'm researching is social capital, and its level in my country is very low. Citizens are not that much aware of the importance of relational goods, neither of carrying the responsibility for others and for common goods, which is necessary for proper functioning of social finance and impact investing in current system. And in this sense, my question relates to introducing social finance and impact investing in a country with low level of social capital and giving index, where citizens are not familiar enough with the concept of ESG and especially impact investing. And since we do not have neither cooperative nor mutual financial sector developed here, I would like to hear your thoughts on the role these institutions can play in promotion of social finance in general, as well as on introducing social finance and impact investing to public through the development of these institutions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Can you please tell me which institution should play a role? Sorry.
For example, credit unions or crowdfunding in general. So these, okay. Let's say, okay.
Do you think the reverse, using this institution to produce social network? Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you have been sent this article, but one of the article I had given was an article I've written with Godefroy. Gaëtan Godefroy, and it's exactly the answer to your first question, because the story of this article is exactly the arrival of this impact investing fashion in France, and actually these people they just behave like as if nothing existed in finance before them. And so obviously you have this mutual and cooperative finance or old school social finance people that were doing things. And but impact investing has been really invented by the fund investors and the private equity people. And so they arrive with their whole thing. And in this article with Gaëtan Godefroy, we show exactly this. You have the old social finance and the new fund managers, impact investors, and that are somehow promoting something quite different. First, the kind of target, the kind of companies they want to finance are usually different because they want to make more money for because also they are funded the way they are funded does not enable them to be to have a lot of freedom in the way they choose how they finance, because they okay. It's okay. So first they try to target more business company than social businesses, for example. They are not able to finance cooperative because the co-op are usually in most of the countries they cannot distribute a lot of money, or they cannot have private investors that are not okay. And so impact investors, this new wave, let's say, they are really pushing also toward the standardization of all businesses into the capitalist system. So it's very difficult to, they are not able to finance cooperative, for example. So yeah, so it's very different, but I agree that this old school social finance, cooperative finance, mutual finance, and now the new school crowdfunding are also looking for a different finance. But I don't think I think it's a bit tricky to say it's impact investing, because then you just open the door, you know. and somehow it's what they succeed quite well in France, because they had this report and they say, okay, we are all impact investing, which is not really, so I think even into social finance, it's very important to look into details. So
Thank you very much.
So for the second question, I'm not sure that money is a good way to do to create a social network. I think more than what have been shown by the research from in anthropology and sociology, for example, in microfinance, and is that usually these institutions, even let's say the most moral and good behavior microfinance, they rely on pre-existing social network. Usually they don't create any social network. So I think it's really the reverse.
Understand.
they are exploiting, because the money business is all about trust, no? And so it requires trust, but it does not build trust. The trust should be built outside.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. So now we move to the second discussant, Alex Wang. He's calling from China. He's a Secretary General of YouThink Center, and he is also a EOF fellowship member. He won a fellowship, and I mean, we are very happy to have him with us. So, Alex, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Professor, for your presentation, and also thanks very much for UF to organize this fantastic event. I just want to share that some situation in China. Actually, it's very interesting that in China we also have some professors, and also there's also many people from non-profit sector, and also some from the social sector, different finance innovation, including inclusive finance and also microfinance, microcredit. And this year's in China is very interesting that maybe some of you already heard the fintech, the finance technology is very, very popular here. So based on this, I think they are doing many different things, like giving the loans to the people using the mobile phone. So I think it's very interesting that I was thinking that technology can play a bigger role when we talk about impact. How we can make best use of technology in a good trade, in the good side. And my second idea, I was thinking when I listened to Professor's presentation, I think that now we all realize that our current system has some problem. That for the financial system, the richer get richer, the poorer get poorer, and all the resources and money capital go up, and then they never came down to the grassroots. But I was thinking that if we really want to bring the systematic change, it's a very complex problem. And I was keeping asking a question, maybe I want to get the answer from Professor as well. I was thinking that there are two kinds of people who are really working in the sector. One kind of people working on the impact finance or social finance is that they are originally from finance industry. The original from the banks, the VC funds, and somehow they want to take some social responsibility. They think that impact investing is such a good word, more attractive. I think this is one kind of people, and there are second kind of people is that they are traditionally working on non-profit sector or social sector and social development. And one day they learn that the tour of finance can really, make a bigger difference, helping the poor, helping others. I was asking myself, and also I want to get answer from Professor, that which group people you think will be the mainstream or will be the major power that we can bring the change. Because what I found that the people who are working in finance sector, their logic is very different from the people who are working in social sector. Their KPIs are all the numbers, returns, ROI, and all the monies they can make. And some of them, the reason why they put impact there is that it helped them to raise the fund to attract some RP. But I was thinking that I'm not sure that how about other countries that we can really trust, as you said, that we can really trust all these bankers or people working in finance sector can really put the social responsibility in their body and then do something social good. So this is my question, and I definitely think that there's a huge program or complex system we need to work all together. I think one of the key things is that the culture, the mindsets of the people have, and we should bring the systematic change. But the first thing is that we should bring the mindset change. Like everyone should have the common understanding about all these standards, all these trees, and how we can really make the standards of the finance for good, how we can engage all the stakeholders, and then we can bring the systematic change. But I think this is a really good start. Like Professor, you did a great research, and I believe that all these research outcomes will come to the industry and bring more change. Step by step, more people will join. But I still have the question under which group people you think that we should trust and work together more, and who can bring bigger change. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry, because I think my talk was to somehow to, yeah, okay, maybe somehow complicated. Because the main idea I think, okay, let's try to say this like that. So I think first it's very important to think about deep reform of the financial system, okay? And so this because of many reasons, but now in the financial system, how the financial system is working, it gives too much power to fund managers and to financial investors, and these people are only looking, let's put it very crudely, at return and risk. It's for legal reason and also for technology reason and so on. And on the side of this financial system, we have also old alternatives, like, but these old alternatives are losing grounds and so on. And so I think it's very important to be able to differentiate between what comes from the center of this financial system, which is decided that only with adding a little bit of impact into a financial decision that is not changed, which still goes on selecting targets according to the financial return, looking at the financial risk and so on. And just by adding a little piece of concern, let's say, like it will be enough to reallocate the funding to important questions. So once we have said that, I agreed about the two classes of people that you mentioned, which means that you have definitely people coming from inside this finance industry that have been trained in thinking into risk and return and allocating portfolio and so on. And these people, they are still a small minority of them are a bit unhappy with the financial system, especially after the big financial crisis of 2008, they discovered that suddenly what they loved was not so nice. And they decided to not to change anything, but to say, okay, maybe we can recycle our knowledge and promoting impact investing. This very narrow meaning, no? And obviously, at the same times, you had the not-profit and social sector that was starving for funding, because the same period that I've seen the financial sector being so big and so powerful was also a period when for example, in a developing country, the states were asked to cut, for example, public funding. You know, you have this neoliberal turn and so on. And in developed countries, the welfare state had a lot of problems, funding problems and so on. They had big reforms in most of the countries, which means that somehow the social sector are less funded by the public money and so on. So you have this, on one hand, you have a sector who is looking for money and was loose ground. And on the other hand, you have a sector that have become very powerful and so on. And these people, they say, okay, let's add a little bit of impact and it will be enough. It will be good. So I don't think any of these these people, they can get on well, because some are looking for money, others have money. And so, you know, when you look for money, you can accept a lot of conditions. But as a general solution, I really think that what is more important is to reduce the capacity of the financial sector to control so much of the money flows. That would be, and I don't think that the impact proposals are the good direction. Yeah, and for example, yeah, and so there's a lot of agitation. I don't know if I can say that, trying to make it happen, to think to make it realistic, like calculating scores of impact and things like that, but it does not change who has the power on finance allocation. No. And if you if I make a connection with the Ingrid's questions, when you look at are usually the cooperative were funded. They were not funded with a criteria of impact. No, it's possible to organize financing without building all this infrastructure. Yeah, and so about fintech, I would say it's the same question. Fintech, it depends which fintech. What is very clear is that the telecommunication companies, they have entered into the business of money management, of channeling the money, let's put it. But the telecommunication companies, they are not regulated as banks, no? And if banks were regulated, it was for a reason. And so it's somehow you have a new kind of industry coming from telecommunication companies entering this field of activities. And so obviously it's a new player. It can be like fintech or like telephone companies. But also we have to remember that the societies over the years have decided to regulate the bank systems, to regulate the insurance. So if fintech has to play a role, it should be important to regulate also the telecommunication company when they are in charge of manipulating the money, which is a common good. If we talk about common good, I think the money is also a common good. So yeah, and then it depends. What do you put in the software? Would you write software that guarantee a good return for private finance, or you can write another software? No, it's not the technique that makes the politics.
Okay.
Sorry for my long answer.
No, but it was also generous. And now we have the last and third discussant. Long story short, I mean, 30 minutes before this meeting, my internet collapsed, but luckily for me, I was at the house of the third discussant, close to his house. So I will introduce you, just switching my video camera. Plinio Limata is from the Village Policy and Happiness. He's a postdoc, and the floor is yours. I mean,
okay, thank you, Paolo. Hi to everyone. Mr. Chiapello, thanks a lot for your speech, for your intervention, and for the replies that were quite clear. I would like just to touch a few points regarding what you said. I totally share your criticism towards the concept of impact investing, especially because, you know, when everyone starts using it, the words starts becoming empty. It lost a lot of sense. So I think this is kind of happening nowadays, especially, you know, as a reply to the problems, let's say, that the capitalist system is posing, but at the same time, still thinking about solution within the system that is not able to, you know, reshapes things seriously. Regarding what you said, especially when it comes to impact, nowadays we have a lot of debates about, you know, what this metrics could be, and I do refer, for example, to the debate on as ESG criteria that are, you know, being criticized for the fact that they're not really taking into consideration real dimension of sustainability. So every time, basically, we find ourselves asking, what's the impact we are referring to? What's the sustainability we're referring to? And this, of course, it's related also to the criteria, logic, and rules of the institutions we are looking to. Institutions that nowadays, as you highlighted in several articles of yours, are kind of mixing these logics to create new instruments like social bonds or others. And still, it's a process that most of the time happens top down. And this is the first aspect I'd like to pose as problematic. I mean, we should be able to include a bottom-up approach. And this difficulty is also highlighted by, you know, the question that Ingrid was posing you. Actually, those realities are working closely to territorial or local realities are experiencing much more problems than the others, even though their impact perhaps may be bigger and more sustainable than others. And then my last two observations I'd like to ask you. First of all, this kind of institutional logic assemblage, we may call, right? Do you think that should be based on some kind of a ranking of values? I mean, you were the one referring also to power, the dimension and matters of power between the actors that are playing in this field. And of course, they will have an importance in defining what's next. And my last question, and thank you for your time in replying, is just about, you know, these boundaries that you correctly recalled that are, you know, collapsing, or at least they're blurring, right? So do you think that these boundaries in the future will still have a reason to exist, or we're going towards something that's totally new that may give the chance to, you know, reassess basically reality and institutions as we know them? Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure I understood the second question about the institutional logic and assemblage, but
it's just I was referring there to the balance of power between these institutions, and of course, you know, this will have an influence in defining, you know, what's next in the field.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're right to yeah. Okay. Somehow this impact, this search for impact metrics universal impact metrics is already something that has happened with ESG criteria, which were more for the standard companies. No, the standard company were not supposed to make any impact, let's say. they have this ESG criteria, and it was already quite complicated to standardize. But it's exactly the same move, because what they did for social responsible investment for standard companies, they try not to add another thing and produce other metrics, because when you all this is made for asset managers, and that are making decision at a distance. They don't want to see the companies, they don't want to know the people, they just want to, you know, to manage portfolio at a distance. And sometimes you have like fund of funds giving funds to give to funds, etc. And so they just need to have figures and metrics to report and to make decision at a distance. So obviously, if the financial system is organized like that, you cannot escape these questions of metrics, no, and producing standardized metrics. But if you look for another way of channeling money toward the projects or venture that need it, you can have other ways that are relating more and face-to-face, more on personal relations, which were not so far ago quite common. Like if you think about networks of banks, where you meet your banker, you have your company or your association or your cooperative, you just meet your bank. You talk with the banker about your funding problems and so on, and so the banker knows about you and so on, and he or she doesn't need any metrics about impact, no, because they know the business, they know the problems, etc. Maybe they need metrics about finance, but not about impact. So impact is really for finance at a distance, and so like ESG. And so I think it's important also to reflect on that, the size of the chain. It's here where it comes with the bottom-up story, because the bottom-up story is a story about people being closer together, no? And if you know more about really the project and so on, you don't need all that, no? You just need to discuss and to accompany the projects where they are and so on. And you don't need to have all these metrics. And so you don't need to have all this infrastructure. It's only important when you manage money very, very far from the ground. So that would be one answer. And about the blurring of boundaries, okay. Some of these people are like prophets. So I know I have been, but they think, okay, they have this dream that it would be possible in like another place to have another economy where all the dimension, which would be the social dimension, ecological dimension, would be re-internalized and taken care by the company, no? And where you would have finance being so aware that they will only finance that kind. Okay, you have this idea, no? And so that would be so good to blur all the frontier, because somehow these people think that they can. It's really like for me, it's really like a conversion project. Like, you know, if everyone is converted and put a lot of responsibility in one's behavior, it will be okay, no? But unfortunately, it's not that. I think it's more complicated when it comes to the society or the economy, because it's not only questions of what you have in your art or what. It's also a lot of questions about institutions, about sector of activities, and you have a lot of things that are not related to that, and that requires to have rules, regulation, and so on. And for example, it's not the same to lend money and to insure people and to look after the elderly and so on. And so what happened in the end is that you have something that is the specialization in the society. And so if you take into account that, I think because of this natural process of self-specialization, you have to build boundaries, no? And so if the boundaries are there, it's because you have rules of the games that are different, no? So obviously we can move boundaries. It's the story of social change, but this idea that we could get rid of boundaries in general, I think it's a very scary idea, no? Because, yeah, for example, if we look at the history, I'm not looking at so here we are talking about the boundary between using tax money versus versus for-profit money or investment money. So when you blur the boundaries, it's as if you say, okay, we don't need any more tax money. So I think if you have a boundary, you need to defend the boundary, which means you need to defend the capacity of the states to raise taxes, no? Because, yeah, for example, and so this this was there for a reason. So it's very important to reflect on that. And if I take another example, in the finance sector, we used to have boundaries between pension systems, insurance systems, bank systems, and the finance. And there are people who are managing funds for others, more or less, no? And what happened is because of the deregulation, all the boundaries have been broken, which means now we have big companies that do everything. But somehow it's different, and it's different to make loans, insure people. And again, I think it's quite risky to put everything in together. And moreover, what happened is that the people from the finance have taken over mainly the field of making loans and of insuring people, and now managing their pensions. So, and whereas, yeah, the boundaries at the reason. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so why not? But be careful. A unified world is not always a good reason. So it comes back to the balance of power. Who has the interest of breaking the boundaries?
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so now back to me, and thanks Plinio for the comment again.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chiapello, also for your generous question. I mean, it was a very good dialogue. Also, the session that I moderate, they last minimum 80 minutes, but I mean, it's good like that. So I say thanks a lot to Professor Chiapello. We hope to have you the next round next year to the F School. And we ask you, of course, to remain here in Zoom, because we are going to do an interview kind of. And to the people that are following, just a quick note. As you know, the next lesson has been moved to September. So we will have Professor Cristina Bicchieri in September. But on the 28th of July, we will have the workshop with Aiza, with all the people, in which we will discuss together the things that we are all learning here during this session. And then the school goes a bit on a holiday. I mean, then we will have in August 3 lessons, Francis Dudu on public health, and then Joseph Stiglitz and Robert Frank. And so, I mean, we are at the last step, the last round of the school, but it's been really a good path. So thank you all, and Lourdes, you can send our video of Anne.
Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, Paolo. See you soon. Bye.